during a PAI, if changes have been proposed to the manufacturing or packaging batch record, um, when and how should said changes be submitted? And would this be considered gratuitous information?
Oh, who's going to answer? Unless somebody else can fill in. Are these changes you're thinking of, are they changes that are a corrective action to the inspection finding, or?
Including kappas and also changes that say are for operator ease. So something that may not affect quality.
So the way to think about this is if that information were originally described in the application, and now that original application information is in effect being changed in some way, perhaps in response to the inspection or because the opportunity of the inspection makes your firm think we should be doing this different, better, then you should update the application submission. And now, this is a great question because it really is forcing me to think through what's properly addressed via the application only and what's properly addressed via the inspection only. And we, of course, know there's plenty of overlap where things are germane both to the description in the application and to coverage on site during an inspection. So, you know, at the least, have that discussion with the inspection team and also with the reviewer through your normal mechanism for communicating with the agency.
Our question is also, how do we submit said information and in what form? Would that be considered an amendment or? Because it's a very vague situation and we're usually confused about this.
Well, because the application's yet to be approved.
Yes. And we don't want to start something that can lead to something.
Right, then it's an amendment to the application.
Yes, yes.
Whether it's a significant amendment, a major amendment or not is a separate question for which you have to pay by drinks.
Anybody else? Okay. Microphone number 2, step up nice and close for me, please.
Okay. We are a distributor company, and we submit the DMF in paper format right now, but we are preparing to submit it next month. My question to you is, when we get this, the document from the supplier and we upload it into our software, are the hyperlinks broken or not?
What was the last few words of your questions about something working or not?
Concerning about the hyperlinks.
Oh, the hyperlinks.
Yes.
So when you submit your DMF in ECTD,
correct,
right? Your hyperlinks need to work.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what we're concerning about. We haven't done it yet. We're gonna do it next month.
Well, yes, the hyperlinks need to work. I'm not quite sure I'm getting the question.
The question is how the hyperlinks, when we get the document from the manufacturer and we upload it into the system, how the hyperlinks gonna be working or not?
Well, the hyperlinks are from one document to another document within your ECTD sequence, within that same sequence.
Okay.
So before you send it in, you're going to want to make sure that they work. If they're not working, then you would need to fix the hyperlinks. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take one of our online questions if we could, please.
Okay, this one is for Ted. What is predictive analytics?
Sounds like that question had come up based on some of the earlier presentations. I think there's a couple ways you can look at that. If you're looking at it from the company's perspective, what we want you to be doing is thinking about when you need to submit that application. And that really starts with when do you think you need it to be approved. And so work back from that. And certainly there's cases because of new chemical exclusivities, things of that nature, where you may not be able to submit your application until a certain date. The other types, right, the majority of other submissions that come through, the companies do control when that application needs to be submitted, and a day or two here or there is not going to impact the overall time to approval. And in fact, as we would say, it's worth a couple days to get it right. And so what we want companies to be doing is thinking about, I need to be approved by this date. What does that mean then in terms of getting all of the pieces in place, right? When do I need to have it submitted so I can get it reviewed, get my mid-cycle, get my response back? That also means thinking about some of the development, and you'll hear a little bit more about that too. If it's a more complicated product, when do I need to put my meeting request in, right? When is my pre-submission? When do I need to file and get the pre-ANDA number? All of those type of things we want companies to be looking at and sort of predicting the timeline, because oftentimes we see companies say, I need to be approved here, and everything comes in. Right? That's not enough time for them to do what they need to do, and it's not enough time for us to do what we need to do. Internally, we are using predictive analysis on the other part of this morning's discussion to try to help us make sure we have a better understanding of the workload that's before us, and trying to predict how we're doing against the goal so that we can make corrections before it's too late. If we wait until we finish the month and we have to do a report to Congress and we're not at 90%, it's too late to salvage that. So we're doing a lot of work in advance, much more on the front end than we have historically, using some of the new tools that we have to try to predict where do we need to be to meet this overall GDUFA goal. And so in that case, we've done some predictive analysis too. Here's where we are this month. Here's where we need to be, right? We're at X%, we've already met. Here's our potential. All those type of analytics are going on within the agency to help make sure that we are responding to you guys on time.
All right, thank you, Ted. Microphone number 1, nice and close for me, please.
So my question is for the panel. I think Chris should be the person answering this. I'm just making an assumption. After an ANDA has been filed, can we still do a control correspondence? And if yes, what is the recommended form of communication?
If you have an ANDA in-house, you cannot submit a control correspondence.
I mean, in case we have a DMF holder who just changed like a point of contact information, and you want to ask FDA what to do next.
You should contact your RPM for your ANDA. And, yeah.
Okay, microphone number 2, please.
Great. First off, let me thank you all for putting on this forum and all the informative presentations. It really is helpful for industry. I have a question which I suppose might be for Ted. When we have an application which is tentatively approved, and we just found that when we submit our request for final approval, it's considered an amendment with a 3-month clock. So with that in mind, can you provide some guidance with regard to when we should submit that amendment if we know the date that we want final approval to be? Do we need to specifically target 3 months ahead? Should we submit it less than 3 months ahead so that you can meet your GDUFA date, even though it is, because we don't want it to be finally approved after our date we want it?
So very good question. Well, the first thing we would say is making sure we understand what the type of amendment is. And this, again, is where the companies can be a little bit proactive and predictive. If it's purely a conversion and nothing else is included, then try to get as close to the 90 days as possible. If you have to err, sometimes there's weekends and things like that. We certainly understand that, if it comes in at 93 days, we're not going to, hassle you. We understand what that magic date is. And certainly, help everybody too. Put that date in your conversion. We're submitting this for, this magic date coming up July 1st or whatever it is, right? That will help us. Certainly we're watching on the inside too. There's no penalty for being a couple days out. What we don't want to see is it's expiring in 10 months. Here's my conversion amendment. Too much can happen between those 2 points in time. In the reverse, if you give us a couple weeks, there may not be enough time for us to go and revalidate all the reviews. Are things still in place? Was there a last minute reference listed drug labeling change? Was there a last minute United States Pharmacopoeia change? What's the health of all the facilities? So, give us at least that 90 days. If you're a little bit worried, err on the side of adding a couple days on your end. A couple of the examples we had shown earlier in terms of how we were tracking the makes or misses were tied specifically to those type of scenarios, or we could make the goal, but if we let it slide a couple days, to your point, we give that company that full approval. We'll do that. What we're going to try to do is capture those and report both metrics out. Here's where we are against the goal. Here's where we are against the goal, and including those first generics, tentative approvals in certain cases matter, those type of things. So we will work with you with a couple-day window there.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and take another one of our online questions, please.
This question was for Brian Hasselbalch, and it says, in case of a USP monograph for a generic product is issued, do we have to comply with this USP monograph even if we don't claim USP in the label?
The answer is yes, if the name, there are two provisions. If the name you're using matches, is recognizing the USP, then whether you put comma USPNF after it doesn't matter. It's still subject to conformance or being in conformance with the USP conditions. However, the statute says you can, you would not violate the statute misbranding or adulteration provisions if you differ from the USP in some regards, not identity. The identity of the active must always conform with USP, but there are other attributes of the product that can vary from the USP conditions as long as they're plainly stated on the label, and most people don't want to do that. But as long as you do that, then you don't violate the statute, and you are technically in conformance with USP, except it's plainly stated on the label where you're not. So, dissolution, for example, let's say. Okay.
All right, microphone number 1, please.
My question is to the TED. Like we do aware certain JDUFA review process about IR, CR, 1 month timelines and all. I want to understand what will happen during the endorsement period, which cannot be predicted many of times based on my experience. Some of the NDAs will be endorsement will be cleared like in 1 week. Some of them are like 3 weeks or 4 weeks under endorsement period. What will happen during the endorsement period, and what is the general timelines, and what do you follow the procedure?
How much are you asking about?
Endorsement period.
I'm sorry?
Endorsement period.
Endorsement
Means
period?
after
Endorsement
completion of
period?
the review, NDA
Okay.
goes to the endorsement period.
Okay.
What is the general timelines for an endorsement period?
All right. Most people probably focusing on the endorsement period for an approval or tentative approval.
Yeah.
And I think there's two really endorsements to look at. In an effort to get all the pieces together, each of the disciplines has to go through and make sure that they're on board and understand. Obviously, there's a wide range of size of disciplines. Right? You have a labeling, you have bio, which includes more traditional bio, and then the clinical components as needed. And then you have the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, which has several, right? The traditional chemistry, micro, all of those. So each of those disciplines needs a little bit of time to pull itself together. But when we think of this at the higher level, we think about the time that the Division of Project Management needs within the Office of Generic Drugs. And that's the group that's now getting this feedback from all of those disciplines and putting sort of the package together, if you will, in terms of making sure that we have all the right review, facility, and also the policy pieces that we need to go into approval. The typical time, and caveat that heavily, it's typical, that's a 14-day period. And certainly in some cases, maybe a day or two in advance of that, around there. Once in a while, things can change as they go through the double and triple checks to make sure that all the pieces are in place. But if somebody were to ask me, 14 days is a 95% answer to that question.
Thank you. And I have one more question.
Nope. Go back to the back of the line. Microphone number 2. Please step right up.
So my my question is related to the compliance. So a firm is ready, GDUFA goal is coming, but there is an inspection which happened, and there were 483s issued. There was no official action as such, but agency issued a CRL stating that there are objectionable observations, and that's why applicant got a CRL. So my question is why, based on those observations, a CRL is issued instead of evaluating it whether that application is getting affected due to those observations or not. Same thing with a warning letter. Like if one firm is issued a warning letter, whether those warning letter observations are affecting the current application or not. So instead of holding the approval and issuing a CRL, is there any approach agencies thinking that because we all want approvals, agency want approvals, we want approvals, and I can give you one of the example. We got a TA for one firm got a TA. They were waiting for the final approval, but at the time it is ready for final approval, the site has a compliance issue. It was a warning letter. So agency issued a CRL that they are not going to give us a final approval. So I was thinking, like, instead of issuing a CRL, whether it should be evaluated for, or the application has to be evaluated for those observations, whether that's going to affect this application approval or not. That's what I think, like, whether agency is thinking in that direction or not. I know the current policy or current practices, if there is a warning letter or if there are objectionable 483s, it's going to lead to CRL. Whether agency is going to think in a different direction or not.
Okay, hopefully you guys got a question there. All right, who's going to field that one?
Let me try and address that. Not every 43 observation would stop an approval based on a facility condition, let's say. And in the absence of a 43 issuance, even when a pre-approval or other inspection is done prior to approval decision making or CR issue, not every absence of a 43 observation means the facility is okay. Right? There's a review going on in the application at headquarters apart from the site inspection. And while they're meant to be done in concert, that is awareness and coordinated, all right, it may be that the inspection team chooses to not cite something on a 43 that they are concerned about. They may mention it to you. They may not be sure that it's an issue. They refer the matter back to the center review team, and that team decides those findings, description in the application together warrant the CR for that facility process or related kind of an issue. So does that help address this? Yeah. So a warning letter, though, generally speaking, maintains a firm in what we call official action indicated status. That status, OAI for short, generally speaking, means we will not approve a pending application until that's lifted and resolved.
Yeah, a follow-up to that one, like there is no import alert as such on the applicant, right? So if the observation, that's what I'm trying, that's the practice, I agree, and that's the practice FDA follows. But say if the observation is not affecting that particular application, should that be holding the approval of that product or not?
And that's the question you're going to answer during the break.
Okay.
So he's going to come tackle you right when the break starts, so that you continue this. And I apologize for cutting you off, but there's a lot of people waiting with questions. Can we go with our next online question, please?
Yeah. So our next question is for Sarah. Can you define the term assessor? Is it different in some way from a reviewer?
Right. So just a little bit of detail there. So the assessor, we have both primary and secondary, which is similar to the reviewer piece, looking at primary and secondary reviewer. But what we are trying to do is reframe the thinking a little bit more to be more of a technical and a regulatory expert and focus more on those aspects. So getting less into some of the more some of the interesting or other parts of the review and really focusing on what are those requirements for approval and ensuring that we capture that information. So both the primary and secondary assessors would be delving into that part of it.
Okay, back here in the room, microphone number 1.
Okay,
please.
thanks. My name is Ming from Allen Laboratory. I'm not sure this question related to policy, but I'm not sure this under OPQ or OGD. So for the generic drug, especially involved submission and extended release product. So FDA have a specific product guidance for each product. Some product they have listed the alcohol dose dumping study, some don't. So for the industry, assume if there's no, in that particular product, there's no alcohol study requirement listed, we assume this is not required because you have other product listed clearly. So how FDA view on that? Because sometimes if we don't do it, we get major deficiencies. So you need to do alcohol studies, even though the specific product guidance didn't mention it. So I would like to hear from FDA's, from policy's point of view, how we suppose require industry to do, because we cannot have guessing what we should do. So it's involved policy, how to FDA policy and consistency regarding alcohol study cross board of extended release product and what we supposed to do, because it's for us difficult to do whether we should just blankly do all the alcohol study for all the extended release product, or we follow the specific product guidance. If not required, then we don't do it. If required, we do it. So we would like to hear from panel.
Who wants to field that one?
It might be me. So I think I'd prefer if you'd follow up with me after the break on that question.
Okay, great.
Okay, and then
All
I
right.
can get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Microphone number 2, nice and close for me, please.
My question is to Mr. Jonathan Resnick. When we do the ECTD submission, we receive an acknowledgement in a form of a PDF, which is not the case with the submission, which is when it is done as an SPL. We don't receive any PDF acknowledgement for the SPL submission. Is there any plan or any future upcoming wherein the SPL acknowledgement will also be provided in a PDF form, which is more easier to understand, and that gives a more clear indication about the acceptability of the SPL for drug listing?
So, so my area doesn't.
Sorry about that.
That's better. So an SPL submission, right? That's not an ECTD submission. So this gets outside of my area. But so is this an SPL submission for like safety report or
For the labeling submissions.
For the labeling submissions in there? So I really can't speak to that. Just the submissions where you're if you're providing an SPL file within the ECTD, you'll get that PDF acknowledgement back.
The SPL submissions are also through ESG gateway only.
Right, but that's through a different group. So I wouldn't be able to answer that. So what I would suggest is you would ask that there should be FDA should have a contact email address for those SPL submissions, and to ask through that channel.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Our next online question, if we could, please.
This is for Dr. Chazin. And they're referencing the size and shape guideline. A size increase up to 1 capsule size is allowed for hard gelatin capsules, according to this question. Would similar criteria be accepted for soft gel capsules?
I may not be the right person to answer that because I didn't write that guidance, and that would be more of an OPQ guidance. I'm only focused on the allowable difference causing a safety issue. So if you're going to change things within the guidance, you're going to have to make those considerations. So I may be able to offline try to find you a resource to answer the question properly.
And again, any of the questions that are posed in the room or outside that we don't have time for, or is not in the bailiwick of the panel, you've got the email address on your screens where you can send those questions in. Microphone number 1, please.
Hi, my question is to Ms. Lisa, and it's related to ANDA filing review. See, nowadays, like FDA is issuing queries on API lots to be used for the exhibit batches, which are used for ANDA submission. The stability guidance published by FDA, the Q&A, it specifies that you have to use 2 lots. It does not specify how you have to distribute. While there is a presentation from FDA which talks about how you have to distribute, but it's not a official guidance. So nowadays we are getting, like, lots of companies are getting queries on the same thing. Like in some cases FDA is saying, okay, you give a commitment, and in some cases they are going back and saying, no, we will not accept the commitment, you have to make batch. when we have an application which has cleared its screening, and then there were no such queries in IR, and finally in the CR we are getting the similar kind of query. So how should we respond to that?
So I'm not sure if Ted, or Brian, in terms of the API area, would have any thoughts. If go ahead.
Maybe we should talk later because I'm not sure I understand all the specifics. I will say that when it comes to a generic applicant, we get lots of control correspondence on the issue of stability and exactly what mixture of API suppliers, batches, and finished product lots have to be done in order to demonstrate stability. So I know it's a difficult issue. We're working on a couple of policy documents, both guidance that help sort this out, and frankly, bring alignment between the NDA and the ANDA expectations from a scientific and technical standpoint. Still probably going to be some differences, but those we hope will have more of a rational basis given NME versus generic. So in development, if you want to talk to me later, I'll see if I can get it sorted out.
Okay. Thank you.
Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you. In the GDUFA 2 goals letter, there is an option for submitting a pre-submission facility correspondence document 2 months before you submit your ANDA. And the FDA did publish a draft guidance last year on the content and format for those. But those draft guidance, you collected comments from industry and other stakeholders. But my question is, what should our plans for format and content of those submissions be prior to the release of a final guidance?
I'll take this. Great question. We're happy receiving them in the format and style that we specified in the draft guidance, acknowledging it's a draft guidance. So we're accepting them now and have been, and we'll continue doing that. And we're...
This isn't a second question, but my question really is, what do we have to follow the draft guidance, even though it's draft guidance?
So,
well, Chief, what do you think?
Yeah.
Well,
so
Lisa, please go ahead.
Unlike regulations, guidances are not binding on industry. If you have an alternative, you can certainly submit that, and we'll take a look at it. But the guidance itself represents our thinking right now, and then once it's finalized, that will be our thinking going forward.
Yeah, and this is a bit of a different kind of a guidance, because this is a guidance that is actually, you like it, you want it, it helps you, it helps us. And so it's not like the other kind of guidance, let's say. The other kind we know about, which seems to impose an unnecessary and reasonable expectation on people. This one we all like, right, and it favors rapid approvals. So if you follow it, fine. If you don't, we'll work out some other way, but
All right. Next online question, please.
Okay, I think this question may be for Lisa. While submitting the pre-ANDA meeting request, we received an error for missing RLD product. Does it mean the signed pre-ANDA is expired, as it is only valid for 60 days according to the guidance?
You said Lisa. So I think the question was that it says that the pre-assigned numbers are only good for 60 days. That's not true. They don't expire. So you can go ahead and submit and request your pre-assignment numbers at any time, and they will remain valid for. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, since it's online, yes.
Okay. Great. Then I did a good job, even, I think.
Microphone number 1.
Yeah. My question is, do you have any policy between the priority review and the regular review on GDUFA goal dates? We know we have the criteria, you will be granting priority review, but there is no change in terms of goal dates. Like it's 3 months. Suppose my personal experience from converting tentative approval to final approval, which is the first generic, and the goal date is like a 3 months again for the final approval request, though it is being granted as a like a priority review. That is one question. The second question is in the same topic.
Just there
Same
we go.
topic.
There we go.
Like as you said, for tentative approvals, we should request a 3 months ahead. Sometimes when you get a waiver letter from a brand, it could be like a 2 months ahead or just 1 month ahead. It depends on the legal outcome and the settlements. May not be possible to maintain the 3 months. That case also, if you submit final approval request like a 1 month ahead to the launch date, you follow your goal date 3 months. That means you are killing a first generic, like a delaying a first generic another 2 months or 3 months based on your policy, which is not good for the public.
To this right, then certainly chime in here. But sounds like you're talking about a case where maybe you don't have the total landscape in place to do the tentative to full approval conversion, where you think in that 3-month window, which we would like to see in normal circumstances. That's what we're looking for, and I think that addresses one of the questions that had come up a few minutes before.
Yeah.
We certainly understand in the dynamic legal landscape that we work within that sometimes agreements and things like that can affect outcomes. And it may be that you intended to give us 3 months, something happens that's now saying this date is now moved forward.
For example, instead of 3 months, I requested just before 2 months to the launch date.
Right. So
based on this.
Yeah. Work your best to give us the 3 months. If there is a change in the landscape that's beyond your control, you certainly have the right to submit that application, right, conversion amendment right then and there. We still have 3 months. Right? The shortest goal under GDUFA 2 is 3 months. Clearly state in your cover letter with the explanation, here's what we're submitting, here's why we think the date, which was X, has now been moved up to M. Right? And then make your submission. Give us as much lead time as possible. We will work with the applicant, but at the same time, remember the goal is the 3 months, and we still have to do the full endorsement process. We have to go back to the disciplines for any tentative approval. Is everything still there? Right? The labeling, USP, each and every facility, are they still adequate? All of that still has to take place. So just be aware that we will aspire to work within a reasonable time frame, but the goal officially is the 3 months.
Thank you.
And we're just a couple minutes away from a break. All the speakers will be here to answer some of the questions in the room. Let's go to microphone number 2, if you could.
I apologize if you answered this and I just missed it in your presentation, but with May 5th being the deadline for ECCD filing for all DMFs, what if you have an ANDA that's already in the queue and while in the process of review, you should happen to visit one of these DMF files after May 5th and it's not an ECCD? Would we be responsible for making sure that that ANDA has been properly updated?
So if the information is already with the FDA, right, and there's no need to get any additional information from the DMF holder, then there's no problem there, right? So if it was submitted in paper prior to May 5th, and now it's June, and in review of the ANDA, they need to look at that DMF, and all the information that the review division needs is already there in the DMF, then it isn't an issue. But if the review division looks at that DMF and says, you know what, we need some additional information from the DMF holder, and now it's after May 5th, when the DMF holder tries to go and submit that additional information, they will need to submit that in ECTD format.
Okay. Let's take one more online question and then one more question in the room. Online, please.
This question is for Sarah. If the RLD label changes during the initial 10-month review, can we submit updated labeling to match the RLD without changing the clock?
The timing of the submission is essentially what dictates the goal date that will result. Thank you. So essentially, if you're submitting it, it typically is considered a minor when you're looking at labeling, with two exceptions, as are noted in the major and minor guidance. So just something to kind of keep in mind at that point in time. But typically, they're considered a 3-month or a minor amendment. So if you're submitting it within the 10 months, for example, you're at that 6-month time frame, then it wouldn't necessarily shift that goal date. However, if you're submitting it at that 8-month time frame, then it would extend that if it's submitted by the applicant.
Okay. Last question to take us into break right here, please.
My question to Ted. Nowadays, we are getting 2 GDUFA goal dates. One is earliest goal date if inspection is not required, and 3 months later goal date if inspection is required. So if in case if an inspection is required and it happened 4 months in advance to the earliest goal date, and there are no 483 observations, or could be a very minor insignificant observation, would the agency ever consider the earliest goal date as the actionable date?
So the question has to do with the goal dates, and certainly for certain types of submissions, under GDUFA 2, supplements, both under GDUFA 2 and some of the older GDUFA 1 ones that are still in play, you may have sort of the option of 2 goals. We will receive the submission, and then in working with our partners, Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, and then potentially if there's bio issues, there's another group that will be involved in looking at the study data and potentially the sites over there. We'll make an assessment whether or not we need an inspection, right, a physical inspection of those sites. If we do, that's what triggers the longer of the 2 goal dates. However, things are timed very nicely, and we're already scheduled to be out there, and this application comes into play, and sort of done in advance of even the shorter goal date, and things look positive at that facility, and then of course whatever other review elements are pulled in, we will provide the answer when we have the answer. So if we're in a position to go to an approval, especially if it's post-approval, you know, those kind of things, we'll do that, right? It's easier to make that happen on a supplement. If we're in the case of an original application, or maybe you're at the 2nd cycle and you have one of these amendment situations where the goal could change, if we have the positive answer, right, we can go right to an approval at that point in time. Right? Certainly then we'll start going down the more formal endorsement process to get that approval, and just because the inspection occurred yesterday doesn't mean you're going to get the approval today, but we certainly will issue final letters, approval, tentative approval, complete response, in advance of the goal. We're going to issue those as soon as we have all the right pieces. And so if those pieces look good, we're going to go forward. There's no advantage to us to hold it. We don't wait for the goal. We're not that coordinated where we can keep applications on the side. If it's done, we're going to put it through right then and there.
Would that be notified to the agent, to the sponsor about that change, if there is a possibility of earliest goal date?
We're not going to be reaching out to the applicant and saying, you know, you have a 6 months goal, for example, but we think we're going to be done at month 5. If we're done early, we will go right into that action letter. And certainly as you get closer to your goal dates, your interactions with the regulatory project managers within the Office of Generic Drugs are increasing. And at that point, you may get a signal from them that at this particular point in time, everything appears to be adequate and we're preparing to go to an act. Right, that may be the signal to you that, oh, okay, this may be an action letter that's issued in advance of the goal date.
Okay, and with that, please help me thank all of our speakers for coming back to the panel and answering questions for us. We will be taking a 15-minute break, so it is by my watch 2:35. We will be starting back